How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
There's a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I'm just very excited to talk about this movie today.
I am. Yeah.
This is gonna be fun.
A fun fucking podcast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gonna do it in a Boston accent.
And I'm actually going to do this the way that Todd wrote it. It feels accurate with this movie, although I feel bad leading off with so many vulgarities.
Well, Gary, you did it during The Iron Giant, which is a children's movie, and this is at least an R-rated movie that has 246 F-bombs in it.
That is true. Okay.
Jeez, please.
I counted them.
Well, fucking hello. Welcome to fucking Cinema Shock, the fucking podcast exploring the fucking stories behind your fucking favorite cult genre films. We know the fucking research, so you don't fucking have to. This is the last fucking podcast you'll ever need about the Boondock Saints. And I'm one of your fucking hosts, Gary Horde. Gary fucking Horde. Sorry.
Get it fucking right, Gary. I'm your other fucking host, Justin fucking Bishop.
And I'm writer comedian Mr. Todd A. Motherfucking Davis. Thank you for joining us on Saint Recordings Day. Everyone's a podcaster today. You fucking fucks.
Oh man. Okay, this is how today's gonna be. This is what it's gonna be. This is gonna be a silly one, to be honest. Before we get going.
This is okay though. This is part of the fun.
No, I'm excited. That's why I'm excited about it, man.
I just hope nobody thought that I picked this one because I was just gonna gush over it the whole time.
No, I think we'll get into your reasoning behind picking this one. But before we do, let's tell people about Cinema Shock Plus, because I don't think we did that very well on our last episode. People may have forgotten or may not know about Cinema Shock Plus if they're coming to the podcast for the first time. Cinema Shock Plus is our members-only feed where you get extended versions of these episodes. So if a 2-hour episode about the Iron Giant's not enough and you want a 2-hour and 45-minute episode about the Iron Giant, it exists. It'll exist for this one too. So we do these bonus segments during Cinema Shock Plus. We do a segment called Somebody Needs a Nap, where Gary reads a bunch of ridiculous reviews that he finds on the internet. We do a segment
that's going to be a fun one for this one.
It's going to be a really fun one for this one. Yeah. We do a segment called Further Viewing, where we give our recommendations for films to pair with that week's subject. And then we sometimes do a little segment with Todd called Trekking with Todd, where he talks about people who are in this movie who are also in Star Trek, if that exists. It does not always, although Todd
not always
pull out some surprises. And let me tell you, on this episode, he's got quite a surprise for that segment. So if you're not listening, if you're currently listening to this and you're not listening to the extended episode, but you want to check it out, go to cinemashock.net/plus. Memberships start at $3. For $5, you get the extended episode. For $10, you get the extended episode plus a video episode, which is just kind of the raw recording video of us. You get to see our dumb faces and our fleshy bodies flopping around in front of a camera.
Stupid.
So you can see every time I pick my nose, or like what you can take a shot every time Todd says nice.
Yeah, we do. We cut a lot of those out of the final episode, but sometimes there's a silence that Todd feels the need to fill.
Yeah.
So you'll just hear a nice. We cut a lot of those out. So if you're not listening to the video feed, if you're not watching the video feed, you're not getting the full experience, to be honest, of what it's like to be in the room with the three of us in the room.
Our premium content.
Yeah, it is
or all the reasons you don't want to be in the room with us at any point. At least to reinforce that feeling for yourself.
Yeah.
Did you mention the extra Twin Peaks episodes?
Extra Twin Peaks episodes, which I'm in the middle of editing right now. So we'll have Fire Shock with me, our Twin Peaks watch along podcast. First episode, if it's not already out by the time this episode drops, should be out very, very quickly, very soon. We're working hard to get the season 1 of Fire Shock with me out, and then season 2 will be coming as soon as we have the fucking time to record it. But season 1's in the can, and we just gotta get edited and out there. So yeah, that's exclusive to Cinema Shock Plus if you want to watch Twin Peaks in its entirety along with us. If you listen to our David Lynch series and you enjoyed it, but you want the full David Lynch experience with us and watch Twin Peaks, which I think is part of the full experience of getting into David Lynch, then that is exclusive to Cinema Shock Plus. So again, that's cinemashock.net/plus to join, and we very, very much appreciate everyone who's joined so far. There's also merchandise and things like that, which anybody can buy, but Cinema Shock Plus members do get discounts on that stuff. So if you want a t-shirt or a hoodie or whatever. That's all I got. That's the end of the plug.
Yay, plugs.
So this week, as we wrap up 2024, continue to our wrap up of 2024 at least, we are continuing to look at a handful of films that celebrated their 25th anniversary this year. Now, although these films may not have a place in a longer series here on the show, believe it or not, we will not be doing a Troy Duffy series on the podcast.
Wait, what?
We did feel that these films were worth discussing for one reason or another. So each of us, the three of us, each picked a movie from 1999 to talk about. On our last episode, if you haven't heard it, Todd picked The Iron Giant, a beloved animated film that has become really a modern day classic.
And I cried about it.
Yeah, and one of the greatest movies ever made, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the greatest animated films for sure. This week, we're going to talk about Gary's pick, a film that's not exactly a modern day classic, but it certainly does have its fans. And it's got a pretty fascinating story behind it, which I think is why Gary picked it, but we'll ask him in a minute. The movie that we're talking about today is, of course, The Boondock Saints.
On the streets of Boston,
This was no gangland assassination.
an FBI agent is on a case.
All the lowlifes in the quiet city of Boston start dropping dead, and you think it's unrelated.
The victims are the mob, and the hitmen think they're on a mission from God.
Anybody you think is evil, don't you think that's a little weird, a little psycho?
Sort of like 7-Eleven. We're not always doing business, but we're always open.
That is nicely put.
2 shooters. Bang, freaking tastic.
This guy's very sharp. He hasn't figured us out yet, he will.
All we know is what we found out from the neighbors. And the general consensus is they're angels.
In a place where the violent have the power,
Destroy all that which is evil, so that which is good may flourish.
one lawman doesn't know whether to catch the killers
I believe what they do is necessary.
or join them.
All the things I wish I could do, these guys are doing.
With every breath, we shall hunt them down. Each day, we will spill their blood.
There was a firefight! Shut your fat ass, Raby! I can't watch a goddamn movie without hearing spoilers from 9 guys you fucked!
That was great. That had big Al Pacino vibes.
Thank you.
It really did. To be fair, he was probably going for that himself.
That's
so.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just did a lot of cocaine beforehand, which is,
Listen, if there's anything that I bring to this show, it is professionalism, and I do what it takes to get there. however many pounds of cocaine that is.
what, pounds?
Well, if you're gonna
Doing
go,
pounds of coke. All right.
It seems like a lot.
it's go big or go home, fellas.
Yeah, or die from overdose.
That's what I meant.
Just
by
to
go
kind
home.
of mention this, but I've got good news and I've got bad news about this episode. The good news is he says we're not doing it. I say technically we are. This might be breaking a record for us as the shortest series we do on a director. I'm considering this part of the Troy Duffy series we do. Maybe we'll get to the sequel at some point, at least as a bonus somewhere. But the bad news is this isn't the worst story out there involving Harvey Weinstein.
Very, very true. He actually comes across as the hero in this story somehow.
He does.
So Boondock Saints : the Harvey Weinstein redemption story.
It's going to be pretty bad if you've got 2 guys in the room and Harvey Weinstein's the better of the 2.
I was going to say, when you think of Harvey Weinstein, I don't want you to think he was all bad.
Listen, say what you want about Harvey Weinstein.
Let's edit that part out so that nobody clip chips me for just for my protection of Harvey Weinstein.
Oh man. All right, so when we talk about the Boondock Saints, a lot of its story is also the story of its director, a guy who was completely unknown in Hollywood and had never even written a screenplay before, only to become, for a brief moment in time, Hollywood's golden boy. His story is a rags to riches to rags story, a cautionary tale of how hubris and ego can put it into your fairy tale before it even has a chance to begin. This is, of course, the story of Troy Duffy. Now, the Troy Duffy that was portrayed to audiences in 1999 was this rough and tumble blue-collar guy from Boston, and that's the persona that Duffy himself helped to cultivate and sell to the press. But in reality, if you start looking into Troy Duffy's biography, Troy Duffy, born in 1971 in Hartford, Connecticut, not in Boston, born in Hartford, Connecticut, he was the son of a Harvard-educated English teacher who had his 5 children give him book reports on literary classics regularly. Duffy spent most of his youth in the Seacoast region of New Hampshire, not exactly blue-collar territory if you look into the Seacoast area of New Hampshire. His family's bought hotels along the New Hampshire and southern Maine coast, and when he graduated from Exeter High School in the late 1980s, his family lived in a 7,500 square foot home in the affluent town of Kensington.
Okay, I hate him already.
I'm only giving these details because it's the narrative when all this stuff blew up was that he was just this blue collar guy from Boston, this bartender from Boston. And it's like, that's not exactly who he was. I mean, he was a bartender that lived in Boston, but that's not really like how he grew up.
It's almost like the Kid Rock story.
Exactly. It's very, very much so. I bet they get along. I bet they're buddies.
You're probably right.
So after a brief stint at college in Colorado, Duffy decided he was going to quit school and head to Los Angeles to pursue his dream of being a rock and roll star in his band, The Brood.
Which it feels fitting that, like, I love the idea that the original name of his band might be based on the late 90s WWF gimmick involving a vampire named Gangrel.
Gangrel, Edge, and Christian. They were a great faction, to be honest.
No, it had awesome entrance music, better than any music I heard in this movie.
Yeah. There's definitely a better chance that his band was named after the WWE faction than, say, the David Cronenberg movie.
Yeah, I was actually going to say maybe it was the David Cronenberg, but no, it's
I think it's
WWF.
more. It's probably the WWF thing because I feel like Duffy was probably more educated in the ways of 90s Attitude Era WWE than in movies.
I was gonna say that in filmmaking in general.
Yeah, it actually, like, the more you see them, you can picture them like just also think, oh, the Brood, they're fucking cool, right? The fucking Brood.
They're drinking fucking blood.
I can totally see it.
Come up with fire.
These guys, a lot of stuff. I know. I can't seem to pull it off either.
It's hard. But, it's a hard accent.
The thing I think of with these guys is, like, if you've ever, I think on Bill Burr's podcast is actually where I heard this, but it was like him and Bill Hader, and they're talking about being in Boston or something, and Bill Hader's like, Boston people are just different.
That's how they live their life. I got a buddy of mine, Joe DeRosa, was opening for me, and it was after the show we did in Boston. I got all my Boston friends, hanging out or whatever, and one of my buddies offered to buy a round of drinks. We're all ordering drinks, and my buddy Joe ordered a White Russian, and my friend was just done with him. And he came up to me, he goes, "Dude, what's up with your boy?" I go, "What's the matter?" He goes, "He just ordered a White Russian." And I didn't really think about it. I was like, he drinks White Russians. He likes, whatever that movie with the dude. He likes
Big Lebowski.
Yeah, he's a Big Lebowski. I didn't think of anything about it. And then at the end of the night, I'm walking back with Joe, and he's just like, "Hey, like hanging out with friends?" He goes, "Yeah, that's cool." He's like, "Dude, what are your friends with?" He was like really friendly, and he was like talking to me. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just stopped talking to me. And it was just like, and it was all based on the fact that he ordered a White Russian. And we were well into our 30s, like late 30s, and this guy still, to this day, and I remember a long time ago.
I just don't trust that guy. I don't know anybody like that.
Well, I remember a long time ago, he, for some reason, was giving the responsibility to watch the house of this married couple. And, of course, so he immediately has us all over there. And we're getting hammered. And and he's taking care of the house. He went down into the basement, and there was some sort of faucet nozzle or something you had to turn on or off. And the lady left a Post-it note on it saying, you might have to turn it a little harder. My husband said it's a little fussy. And my buddy just went up and just immediately turned it with no problem at all. And he just mutters, this guy's a pussy. And we're in his house. And he just said that to his wife, just being, gentlemanly, to a woman. And then my friend just totally judged this guy that he was not a man. Like his man, like that's what I love about my friends back there. How easily you can lose your man card and you have no idea. And they won't even tell you why. They just stop talking to you.
I thought of those stories, and I think of these guys because they just seem like maybe they're not really assholes, but a few of them just seem like they want to fight for no reason.
Yeah. Troy Duffy definitely comes across as a guy who is looking for a reason to fight at all times.
Jennifer watched like half of Overnight. I meant to say that some of the stuff we'll pull from here is from that documentary, if you haven't seen it, about Troy Duffy. And at Overnight, like the way that he talks to certain people.
To most people.
Jennifer's just like, how is anybody friends with him?
Yeah. How does anyone stay around him at all? Anyway, so he moves to LA, and like many struggling musicians in the city, Duffy had to get a job to help pay the bills in between gigs, and he found work as a bartender and a bouncer at a Hollywood dive bar called J. Sloan's. So while he's working there, one night, 1996, he comes home after a night of bartending to find a dead woman being wheeled out of the heroin dealer's apartment across the hall. So, when he goes to LA, he's not like, his daddy didn't give him a lot of money or something, to send him to. He gave him a couple $1,000s to help him get started. He did do that. Duffy and his brother moved to LA together, but he's still living in kind of a shitty area. So he sees a dead body being wheeled down the hall, which is not something you want to see when you come home after a long night, or anytime, actually. But as her body's being wheeled away, according to Duffy, this is the story he tells, the heroin dealer who lived there comes running out of his apartment saying, that bitch has got my money. Then he sticks his hand into the woman's boot to grab the money that he says is his. So kind of a harrowing situation. That would be a pretty traumatic experience for anyone, I think. But Duffy, in his words, he said he was disgusted by the whole situation. And his way of dealing with how he felt about it was to put it all down on paper, turning his thoughts and feelings into an ultra-violent screenplay about two vigilantes who murder anyone that they deem as evil. Now, in a later interview, while he was promoting the film's release, he elaborated on his motivations for writing the Boondock Saints. And I'm going to read this entire quote from him because I think it's pretty interesting. He says, people watching the news sometimes get so disgusted by what they see. Susan Smith drowning her kids, guys going into McDonald's, lighting up the whole place. You hear things that disgust you so much that even if you're Mother Teresa, there comes a breaking point. One day you're going to watch the news and you're going to say, whoever did that despicable thing should pay with their life. You think, for maybe just a minute, that whoever did that should die without any fucking jury. I was going to give everybody that sick fantasy and tell it as truthfully as I could.
So he called up Charles Bronson and wrote the movie Death Wish. Or he wrote Punisher. Either one.
And Death Wish was at least a revenge tale, right?
Because it's like his wife gets killed or something, right?
Yeah.
So, by the way, did you know Punisher and Death Wish came out in 1974?
Interesting.
Punisher's debut was 1974. I was wondering which one was first, like where this vigilante killer ex-cop thing or whatever it was. I don't remember.
Which one came out first in 19?
I think Punisher was like February of 74. And so maybe technically first, but maybe they were writing Death Wish before that.
Wasn't Death Wish based on a book?
Oh, yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. It seems like that was a really popular narrative device, for the time of like the cop gets revenge or the ex-soldier gets revenge or the so-and-so capable person gets revenge.
Yeah, I mean that's always been a thing.
Yeah. But like really popular in like
very
the 70s.
much in the 70s. Yeah, very much so. So Duffy ended up renting a computer so that he could write his sick fantasy screenplay. And despite having no experience writing a screenplay, he went in with a game plan. He's like, I'm not just going in blind. I'm going to go in with a plan. His plan was, and this is in his own words, he said he was going to write it in 3 sections. He says, quote, I wrote the very beginning, then I started thinking of cool shit for the middle, and then somehow between the beginning and the middle, the ending dictated itself.
Oh, so he's reinventing story structure now.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the 3-act structure that Sid Field taught in his lauded book on screenwriting: beginning, cool shit, ending. right?
I think
that's what they teach in film school.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, if we're being honest, I'd go far as to say that he never wrote an ending to the movie.
Actually, that's a good point. It just kind of he wrote like the ending, like as in at the end,
as in at the last page of the screenplay, he wrote the words "the end."
The end.
And decided he was done with it.
The movie definitely has a here's the cool shit, and I don't know, now we're here.
I don't know what we're doing next, but the end. That's what he means when he says the ending dictated itself, is like the cool shit was over, the end.
Yeah.
One could also argue that there's not that much cool shit. If you guys can't tell, we're gonna be a little sassy this episode.
Justin warned me he was gonna be sassy.
I warned Gary I was gonna be sassy on this.
I watched Boondock Saints, and I decided after Justin said that, I was like, all right, I'm gonna, I'll play devil's advocate here. Do this.
Yeah.
Then I watched Overnight, and then I was like, never mind. Whatever.
Fuck this guy. So by the fall of 1996, Duffy had completed his screenplay and passed it along to a friend who was a producer's assistant at New Line Cinema. And then somehow the script, from this producer's assistant's hands, it started making the rounds, as screenplays sometimes can do in Hollywood. And there was something about this screenplay, I don't know what it was, but there was something about this screenplay that was appealing to the studios, something that they felt was sellable. Because you see, in the wake of the success of Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, which was 2 years earlier, 1994, everyone was looking for another quirky, gritty crime picture that could be made on a fairly low budget. Basically, everyone in town wanted to make the next Pulp Fiction, and everyone wanted to be the one to discover the next Quentin Tarantino. So as a result, Duffy's script, which was clearly, we'll say, inspired by Tarantino's style, it got a lot of attention, resulting in a bidding war among several prominent studios. And that bidding war was ultimately won by producer Harvey Weinstein, whose Miramax Films purchased the screenplay for $300,000. Weinstein, of course, had been the person who had been responsible for introducing the world to Quentin Tarantino, having distributed Reservoir Dogs and producing Pulp Fiction, which went on to be a major success. So clearly Weinstein was hoping to see lightning strike twice.
And also, this part felt like like calling back to the Shane Black series we did too, like where there would be people were hot for like the Shane Black script,
Right. Yeah.
It just felt like a similar deal. Like I thought that was like mostly in the 80s, but I guess technically with Tarantino, he kind of sparked that same deal here.
Yeah. There were definitely a lot of imitators after Pulp Fiction. So everyone was kind of looking for something in that vein, and they read the Boondock Saints script and saw that this was a potential like hit in the way that Pulp Fiction had been a hit. So, and when you look at their stories on the surface, Duffy's and Tarantino's, they're not that different, or at least the parts of their stories that got media attention at the time. Tarantino famously worked as a video store clerk before making it big as a filmmaker, and that became a big part of the media narrative surrounding his success at the time. It still kind of is, honestly. For Duffy, the news articles that were coming out in the trades, they all focused on his background as a blue-collar bartender, this kind of nobody who came out of nowhere and wrote a screenplay that was so impressive that it caused some of Hollywood's biggest players to duke it out to see who would have the honor of making it. The difference, of course, is that Tarantino has a wealth of film knowledge. This is a guy, like when you hear him, regardless of what you think about Tarantino, I happen to be a fan, which I think is obvious, but this is a guy who, it's very obvious, lives and breathes film. I mean, yes, he was a video store clerk, but he wasn't working there just because, it wasn't just a coincidence. Like, he wanted to work at a video store because he loved movies. He loved talking about movies to people. And let's not also forget that Reservoir Dogs, his debut film, wasn't like the first time he wrote a screenplay or picked up a camera. Before he even worked at Video Archives at the video store, he had co-written and directed a short film, and then he co-wrote and directed an unfinished feature-length film called The Birthday Party. So, like, Reservoir Dogs, it wasn't just like he just decided to write a screenplay one day and made Reservoir Dogs. Like, this was it was the first thing that got produced, the first feature-length that got produced, but it wasn't the first thing that he worked on.
It was an inevitability, not an accident.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other point of comparison, I think, as far as like career trajectory goes, is Kevin Smith, which was another Miramax discovery who famously worked at a convenience store at the very New Jersey Quick Stop where he'd film his low-budget debut Clerks. And while Smith does have that same kind of rags to riches career narrative that Tarantino had and that the press seemed to be creating for Duffy, he didn't quite have, Tarantino's film nerd pedigree. He wasn't on quite the same level as far as like his knowledge of film history, but he loves what he loves. Like Kevin Smith clearly loves movies. He's just, he might be watching Star Wars instead of City of Fire, like Tarantino or something like that, right? They clearly both have a love for film, though. Plus, Kevin Smith had a background as a writer even before Clerks. Like, he was writing sketch comedies when he was in high school. So while his transition to filmmaker was impressive, it wasn't unprecedented. Like, it's a great success story, but you can look at Kevin Smith's past and go like, well, it makes sense that he would transition into filmmaking. Duffy, as far as I've been able to gather from the various profiles and interviews I've read, had absolutely no ambitions to become a filmmaker before this. He wasn't writing screenplays before this or making short films in his backyard, or if he did, there's no documentation of it at all.
And even when you're watching, like, again, Overnight, everyone in the band with him seems to be a little off with, like, what the fuck is this movie script? Like, where did this come from?
Why are you writing movies all of a sudden? Like what?
This is not what we're here for. We're here to practice and be in the band and make the band successful.
Yeah.
It's like, which on one hand you could look at it as like, oh, is this a grift or something? On the other, I mean, it feels like there kind of has to be some sort of drive from somewhere, because it'd be one thing just to randomly decide to write a movie, but then to follow through with like putting it in the hands of somebody who could get it to a studio and then working on it.
Well, I think that's where his hubris comes into play, is that he just seems to feel like he deserves success. So he's like, well, yeah, I wrote the first screenplay I've ever written. He probably wrote like a draft of it. I don't know. Like, he seems like
I was gonna ask, is this actually a full-blown script, or is this more like the spec script thing?
From everything I've read, it's been described as a screenplay, not a spec script. So I can't say with 100% certainty, but I've never seen the word spec script used to describe it in any of the research that I've done.
Yeah, so I was just thinking back to the Shane Black stuff again. He would write like the spec script to give you like a.
But that's when he was already established.
Sure.
He was already established, and people knew he was talented at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess you'd have to prove you could write an actual script.
Yeah, or if you write a good sounding spec script, but you have to be able to follow through on it with an actual good screenplay too.
Yeah.
So despite Duffy's inexperience, Miramax made him an insanely generous offer. Not only did they purchase the script for a substantial amount of money, but they also agreed to let Duffy direct the film with a salary of $150,000 in addition to what he'd been paid for the script. So he's made almost $500,000 off this already. They even agreed, this is absolutely bananas to me, but they even agreed to let his band, The Brood, produce the film soundtrack. If that weren't enough, they also offered to buy the bar, Jay Sloan's, the bar where Duffy worked, and give Duffy co-ownership of it. So he was going to own this bar with Harvey Weinstein. That was part of the deal that he convinced them to throw in. So clearly this film meant a lot to Harvey Weinstein. So much so that he committed to a budget of $15 million for the film, which is no small sum. And for those keeping score, it's about double what Pulp Fiction had cost. I think Pulp Fiction was $7 million. They were betting big on this, or it seemed like it. And then they were set to shoot on location in Boston the following year.
I feel like there's, with this and, dealing with Miramax, I also feel like there's also, hey, this may be the next Good Will Hunting. It has a little bit of that vibe. It's like if Good Will Hunting was an action film.
I think the only similarities with this and Good Will Hunting, in my opinion, are the Boston accents and them saying fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think that's it. Like, Good Will Hunting is it's a very sweet movie. There's not
I think he's thinking more of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck like writing this movie and coming up.
Yeah, that's what.
But even then, like, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were not like. I mean, this was the first screenplay that had been produced, but they were already acting by this point in smaller roles. But like, they weren't just out of nowhere. But I mean, I see that point of comparison a little bit. But the movies and screenplays themselves could not be more different other than the setting of Boston. But Good Will Hunting's a great movie, by the way.
It is a great movie. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
There is something weird here. I just need to recap real quick. So for those following along, this fucking guy writes a script first time, just like randomly, says he has it just sitting on his computer for a while until he runs into a buddy that works for the studio or whatever, and production company, and it's like, oh, I've got, let me give you this, gives it to him. Somehow that guy gets it around, and he gets $300,000 for the script. 2, first-time director gets $15 million budget for his movie. 3,
without anyone having any idea that if he can direct a movie.
Yeah. 3, his band, The Brood, will record and produce the soundtrack.
Yep.
And 4, I think in the documentary they even cover that he gets to approve all casting and have final cut of the movie.
That was his condition, but I don't know that was actually in any kind of contract, as we will soon see. It becomes a point of contention.
But yeah, and then 5, Harvey Weinstein's like, well, and also going to negotiate the purchase of Jay Sloan's, the bar he works at, and co-own it with him.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Well, I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't understand that. I don't understand why. But that's
there's no reason to be an arrogant prick. But also, this is like the dream for someone. Like, you feel like you just hit the fucking lottery.
Yeah.
I mean, he did just hit the lottery.
Yeah. Yeah. He got lucky. That's exactly what it is. He got lucky. So the trade papers in Hollywood, they very quickly picked up on this story. And I understand why. Because this whole narrative that was being created around Troy Duffy, much of it, in my opinion, is self-mythologizing. I think he cultivated that persona a little bit more, because it made a good story. But this was an intriguing story. So you understand why, like, the Hollywood Reporter and Variety and even USA Today picked up the story and wrote it. He was on, like, the cover of USA Today. Like, this was a big deal. You understand why they wanted to pick up on it, because that story of this guy who's a bartender, who's a nobody, who writes a screenplay inspired by this harrowing, traumatic incident, all of a sudden has got Hollywood's golden boy. That sounds like something out of a movie, right? And he became Hollywood's it boy seemingly overnight. Like, he came out of nowhere. And to add to all of this, the press that Duffy was getting actually led to his band, The Brood, getting attention from major record labels. Because Duffy's name was in the press so much that they knew that if they signed this band, well, maybe it would also sell a bunch of albums because it was Troy Duffy's band, which I don't know why. I mean, it's not like Kevin Bacon's band is selling millions of albums or anything, but or what is Keanu's band's name?
Lone Star.
Yeah.
Lone Star? No, it's not
Lone Star.
Lone Star's a fucking country band. It is not Lone Star.
Dog Star. It's Dog Star. Sorry.
Dog Star.
Yeah, sorry.
Billy Bob Thornton's band.
Yeah, right? Yeah, so, but anyway, regardless, The Brood, for some reason, and it wasn't because of the quality of their music, I guarantee it, they were getting attention from major labels such as Madonna's Maverick Records. So Duffy, it seemed, was like on top of the world, and everyone wanted to be in the Troy Duffy business. Everyone wanted to be a part of what was being touted as the next big thing. So when it came time to cast the Boondock Saints, they were able to attract some pretty big name talent.
So the thing I want to get across here too is because I feel like the media stuff, you get the impression that could happen because of Harvey Weinstein. You can get
100%.
That he makes that happen.
Yeah.
But even in that documentary, you get dropped off and you're like a third of the way into the story already. Miramax has it, the media's out. So what I'm still not clear on with this whole thing is, like, what did this dude do to get Harvey Weinstein so hard for his script? That's probably a bad description with him, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, what appealed to Harvey Weinstein? I mean, maybe he thought the story had a lot of potential and he was thinking of Tarantino, but just, I can't picture this guy just walking in and just impressing Harvey Weinstein.
All I can guess is that there are two lines of thought that I have on that. One is that Harvey Weinstein read it and he saw the similarities to something like Pulp Fiction and didn't want somebody else to get it, so he bought it. So that's one possibility. The other possibility, and these two could both be true, or neither could be true. This is just me speculating. The other is that he saw this. This is a guy who's never made a movie before, who doesn't have any experience, but has written a screenplay that could be turned into something impressive. And because this guy doesn't have any experience, Harvey Weinstein probably thinks he can push this guy around, which he finds out that he can't. Because Troy Duffy, say what you want about him, the guy does not get pushed around. Like he is not. He is the one pushing people around. He's not getting pushed around, not even by Harvey Weinstein. So I think that's probably part of it, is that Harvey Weinstein thought that he could control this guy. He could create this narrative around this guy that would help sell the movie about this bartender who comes out of nowhere, writes a hit screenplay, and that which Weinstein probably would have had rewritten before it got actually made. If I were to guess, if I were a betting man, I would say Harvey Weinstein was going to bring somebody else and to shape the script up a little bit.
I bet you're right. Actually, I've never thought of it that way, and hearing you just lay it out, I feel like 95% sure that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That he thought he's going to bring this kid in. We'll buy your bar. We'll do the lotto thing. And like, you are set. Now shut the fuck up and just do what I say.
Right.
And, and just roll with it.
Yeah. And he did. And obviously
appreciate where you're at right now.
Yeah, which he does not do.
Yeah.
That is one thing that one word that is not in Troy Duffy's vocabulary is humble.
Yeah, not at all. It is just, it's like he could get hubris tattooed across his forehead. It is amazing. And it's this part too is just interesting to me because this does, it does happen in Hollywood. We talked about doing like an M. Night Shyamalan series for a similar reason, just because of how he was presented to the public coming in. If you haven't seen Overnight, it's almost a perfect companion to this, but it's fascinating all on its own because he really is at this point in the story the hottest thing in Hollywood. It feels like, and everybody's willing to glaze this guy up, and he's acted like he's Harvey Weinstein. And it's just, I don't know.
He even says at one point in that documentary, like, Harvey Weinstein wants to be me. Like, he literally says that.
It's amazing. But you know what's crazy is, like, I was even scrolling through, this was on Reddit, I think. And so this is an anecdote. I just feel like nobody would have just made this up. But a guy in there, somebody had posted, what is it with Boondock Saints? That was like the topic on Reddit. And just like started this discussion. Somebody in one of the comments said, I actually have a friend who was a producer that worked with Boondock Saints. And he was like, and he told me that when they were getting things together for Boondock Saints, he had another friend get a movie sold. And he said, my buddy called him up and just told his other friend, congratulations on the movie. Glad everything's going through. That's going to be awesome. And he said his buddy told him, yeah, but kind of bummed. It's not Boondock Saints. So you're the lucky one. And he said, by the way, that movie that his friend was working on was American Beauty.
Wow. 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 It's wild, though. Like, when you talk about him being kind of a golden boy, when you watch that documentary, once all this press is out there, like, you've got celebrities hanging out at this dive bar. You've got like Jeff Goldblum hanging out. Mark Wahlberg's coming over to like a barbecue with Troy Duffy. Like, it's like everyone, like you said, wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to be attached to this because of the way that he was being portrayed by the press as the next big thing. And you obviously want to get it on the ground floor with the next big thing. Like, Mark Wahlberg's actually interviewed in that documentary, and he's talking about like, this guy gets it, and all this. And in fact, Mark Wahlberg was one of Duffy's first choices to play one of the McManus brothers. The other one was Stephen Dorff, Mark Wahlberg, who neither one were very big at the time. I think Stephen Dorff had probably, he'd been acting since he was a kid, but I don't know that he'd done anything big. Blade came out in 98, right? And that was kind of his first big budget thing. He had done Cecil B. Demented probably already by then. But Wahlberg had a couple of movie credits to his name by this point, but mostly they were small roles, with the exception of his role as the villain in 1996's Fear, which would have been released around the time that he was talking to Troy Duffy, I guess. But other than that, he was only had a couple small roles. He'd really yet to break through to like being a movie star. He eventually did make a solid career move by passing on the Boondock Saints to film his breakthrough role as Dirk Diggler in Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights. So good on him or his agent for making the correct choice on that front, because I think things could have gone very differently for Mark Wahlberg had he picked this over Boogie Nights.
Yeah, he'd be more involved in Wahlburgers, I think.
I don't think Wahlburgers would exist.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Wait, you mean he couldn't sustain Wahlburgers off of that sweet Marky Mark money?
No.
I do wish we had the ability to see like career paths had this changed.
Yeah.
Like
Sliders, like this TV show Sliders, where you go into other dimensions, but it's like just the one where David Cronenberg made Flashdance or something.
Right, exactly.
She pulls the string and just a bucket of blood and guts hits her.
It's just intestines fall. It's just a
would
bucket of intestines.
would Mark Wahlberg? Would Mark Wahlberg be?
You can call him Marky
Daryl? Would he be Daryl on Walking Dead?
Oh,
how do you know that's the brother he was going to play?
I don't. Well, the blonde brother, could have been Stephen Dorff. So
that's true. Yeah. Well, Duffy's wish list also included the great Scottish stand-up comic Billy Connolly, as well as Kenneth Branagh, who he hoped would play FBI agent Paul Smecker.
So if anybody out there is drawing a blank on the name Kenneth Branagh, first of all, shame on you.
Yeah, for real. Like, who's listening to this podcast and doesn't know who Kenneth Branagh is?
But
he's very famous.
Maybe you're new to the show, and maybe you're just dipping your toe into the world of cult and genre film. So Kenneth Branagh, he played Dr. Arliss Lovelace in Wild Wild West and Gilderoy Lockhart in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. But he also directed Robert De Niro as the monster in 1994's Frankenstein, where Branagh played the title role. And he also directed Thor for the MCU back in 2011. And if you've seen an adaptation of Shakespeare in like the last 30 years, there's a good chance he had something to do with it. He's like half of his IMDb is all Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah, Todd, I am furious that the very first thing that you mentioned for Kenneth Branagh was Wild Wild West.
What am I not? That's on brand.
This is a celebrated actor of stage and screen, Oscar nominated. His last movie that he directed, or maybe not his last one, 2 movies ago, Belfast, was nominated for Best Picture and Best Screenplay. But we mentioned the legless Southern Belle. Doctor, which, to be fair, he is the best part of Wild Wild West.
Actually, I was going to say, you know what's interesting about that is reverse of Mark Wahlberg. Do you think Kenneth Branagh, like, what would his career have been like if he had
I think he would have been
Saints instead of Wild Wild West?
Well, he was already known by this point because he'd already done like Henry V and like, you know, like he was known. But so he probably would have been fine. But I don't know that. But Kenneth Branagh, great actor. Can't see him in this. It's hard to see anyone else as Paul Smecker, honestly, after what we finally get.
He owns it. Yeah,
he owns it. Yeah. Other actors that Duffy sought out and even met with included Brendan Fraser, Nicky Katt, and Ewan McGregor.
Hello there.
Thank you, Todd. You should do that. Just do that every time we mention Ewan McGregor.
That's the plan.
So when the deal with Branagh fell through for whatever reason, Duffy started pursuing Patrick Swayze to play the role of Smecker. And you actually see that in Overnight. You see him hanging out with Patrick Swayze. Although Miramax really wanted him to cast Sylvester Stallone, with whom they already had a relationship. Now, can you possibly imagine Sylvester Stallone in this role? I mean, it's hard to imagine anyone else in this role. Like Patrick Swayze would have been good, but obviously very different. But I tried to watch this movie imagining Sylvester Stallone in it, and it is hard to do.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? All the lowlifes in the quiet city of Boston start dropping dead, and you think it's unrelated.
Sounds like Sylvester Stallone on Ambien.
You know,
I was just gonna say it sounds like he's at the dentist.
It's too much Tulsa King. He's had too much work done at this point.
Oh man, I really can picture Patrick Swayze in this because, like, I can. First of all, he would definitely still do the drag scene because he's done it. You know?
And this is also, you know, around the time when he was trying to do weird roles like when he did Donnie Darko. You know, he's trying to branch out a little bit, so it would have fit his MO at the time.
I feel like he would have played it way cooler. You know?
Oh yeah, he can't help it. It's just natural.
That's just him. But
it's just natural.
This is fucking insane though. Like, again, Troy Duffy is nobody, but then he goes to like Hollywood A-listers are partying at his bar regularly. Like you see Vincent D'Onofrio there, and like you said, Mark Wahlberg's there, Patrick Swayze's there. There's like just a shit ton of people are just hanging out and coming through. I assume talking to him about potential parts in the movie or something.
Just trying to be a part of this circle, you know?
Yeah.
Even if it's not this movie, they want to be a part of this guy, you know, his career.
It's fascinating, and it's also almost irritating to me for some reason. Like, it's just so shady or something. They're just like, "Oh, this guy's hot. We're all here." You
that's
know,
part
like,
of the business. Like, you know, that's
all
showbiz, baby.
All that bullshit. Yeah.
Well, this is where things between Duffy and Miramax really start to sour, I think, the casting stuff, because Duffy was very adamant about casting who he wanted to cast in the film. So like when Miramax suggested Ethan Hawke and Keanu Reeves for the roles of the McManus brothers, which honestly are not bad choices, Duffy responded by calling Hawke a fucking punk and called Reeves a talentless fool, saying he's like, I'll never work with Keanu Reeves. That guy's a talentless fool. And he refused to meet with either one of them. So clashes over the casting continued as pre-production rolled on. Duffy continued to stand his ground, never budging, seemingly more out of a sense of hubris than anything else. I mean, this is a guy who just didn't want anybody else to tell him what to do, even if that somebody else was one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood who happened to be committing $15 million to help him make a movie, despite the fact that he had absolutely no filmmaking experience.
He's textbook narcissism.
Well, oh, yeah.
The way this douchebag
Yeah.
talks to people. Yeah. Like, it's still not 100% on how he got to this point, but I will give him this. Like, he is living the dream. Good for him.
Briefly living the dream, to be honest.
Yeah. And then maybe this is how it has to happen, is you got to be so self-confident. I don't know. Like, that he just thinks he can roll in and run things himself now.
To an extent, I think. To an extent. But as we've discussed...
I was just gonna say it's a balance for sure. Like they're definitely you need to have that confidence, but God, with nothing to your name, like I'd take as much help and be thankful for it from.
Yeah, and as we've discussed, throughout the course of this the show, filmmaking, even though we focus on the directors because it's a good through line, but filmmaking is a collaborative effort. Like filmmaking, you cannot make it in a vacuum. You cannot make it on your own. And you have to get along with the people who are working with you. That's what a good director does. A good director is able to conduct. A good director is a conductor. But they have to be able to get along with every single person in the orchestra to make what they want to make. And Troy Duffy doesn't seem to understand that. He seems to think this is all about me. And it's not all about you. It's never all about the director. The director is the guy who's driving the bus, but he's not the only one he's not the only one working. He is the decision maker. Yes. That's what a director's main focus is, I think, is making the hard decisions. But you have to have good people who trust you to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And and to not question you. And he just comes in like a fucking bulldozer over every single person that he comes in contact with.
It's super weird. And you could, on one hand, it's like amazing that the people that stick with him, but you can also, there are points you can tell that just the way he talks to the people that I mean the douchey way, but even like that he's the closest thing I can think of is, this is a wrestling reference, but the way like Paul Heyman ran ECW when they had nobody, for some reason he can motivate you and he can keep you going and convince you that the money will come. The fame will come. You just gotta hang on with me. Troy Duffy does have that a little bit, that cult leader thing. Something going on. The people are buying it for a while and that something's happening and you just gotta hang on. Now at this point, he's apparently got all this Miramax money, and I don't think these people are getting paid. We'll talk about that. It's just, I don't know. There is that side of him. But you kind of spelled it out correctly, that the one thing he doesn't seem to get is that, a lot of this may have kicked off because of something you did, but also you're still depending on these people to work and do their job too.
Yeah. You're not going to get it made without help.
Yeah.
So because of all this, because of these clashes about casting, the production kind of comes to a standstill. Now, the official spin was that the project had stalled due to casting and location problems, but the truth is that it stalled because Duffy seemed to piss off everyone that he should not have pissed off. The biggest obstacle that was keeping the Boondock Saints from getting made was Troy Duffy himself, thanks to the director's bad attitude, his massive ego. And those are a bad attitude and a massive ego are a terrible combination. That is not a good combination. His gruff approach to dealing with producers and potential cast members didn't make him any friends. So he didn't have a lot of folks coming to his defense. When he and Weinstein continued to disagree on casting choices, he made the very poor career decision of bad-mouthing Weinstein to everyone in town who would listen, word of which almost certainly got back to Weinstein.
This is insane. Again, to me, it feels like if you get offered all of this money to make your movie, yes, it is all those things we said before. Yes, it is hitting the lotto, but also your mindset should be, okay, now shit's going down. Now it's time for me to work. Now I've got to earn this money. And it almost feels like he was spinning his wheels on I would rather have this actor versus this actor. And I could see Weinstein being why aren't we in production? Have we gotten anything done on the ground yet with actually making the fucking movie that I just paid for.
Right.
And instead, again, of appreciation, Troy Duffy's fuck Harvey Weinstein. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then if you read, or you can get this from a lot of stories of Harvey Weinstein, but again, even in that documentary, there's like the one person in the production agency like gets asked the question about how much power would you say Harvey Weinstein has in Hollywood? And the girl's like, all of it.
Yeah. Like he was literally one of the most powerful guys in town for, I mean, pretty much the entire 90s and maybe beyond. You know, like he was a huge figure in Hollywood, and if you crossed him, like you were gonna get screwed. You know, it's honestly like tying into the stuff that happened with Harvey Weinstein later on. It's a big part of why that stuff took so long to come out, because people were afraid of their careers being ruined if they spoke out against Harvey Weinstein. And that's essentially what happened with Troy Duffy, only Troy Duffy did it obviously for very different reasons. Like he's speaking out against him as if Weinstein owes him something. That is not the case. Now, we'll talk about it. We've already talked about it a little bit, but one of the major sources of information that we used for this episode was that documentary that we've referenced, Overnight, which chronicles the behind-the-scenes story of this film. And it should be noted, does not paint Duffy in a very good light, but it does say something about this guy that when he's on the phone bitching about Weinstein, you as a viewer think, fuck this guy. Like Harvey Weinstein is right to not want to work with this asshole.
Right.
like I said at the beginning of the show, you have to be pretty bad for me to watch a movie and go, you know what? I'm on Harvey Weinstein's side. Like one of the worst dudes on earth. And I'm picking him over you. Like you've got to come across pretty bad.
Well, if you set aside the rape, then, you know.
Well, by December of 1997, Weinstein had enough of Duffy's shit, and Miramax pulled out of the production. When that happened, Duffy and his agents, they started shopping the script all around town, pitching it to all of those studios that had shown interest in the script before Miramax bought it, and all of them passed. Every single one of them. It seemed that Duffy's reputation was getting around and nobody wanted to work with this guy now. But of course, there's also the possibility that Weinstein had essentially blacklisted the guy and nobody wanted to cross Weinstein. That's also a part of this. Possibly. I mean, obviously unproven, but there's a pretty good chance that Weinstein was like, do not work with this fucking guy, or, you know, like Weinstein's a mobster, essentially. So they ended up selling the script to this small production company called Franchise Pictures. So while Duffy was able to keep the $300,000 that he'd been paid for the script, he did have to actually reimburse his $150,000 director's fee, as well as a $700,000 advance that had gone towards the development of the project up to this point. Now, you'd think that being dropped by Miramax would be a life lesson for Duffy. Maybe he'd cool off a bit. Maybe he'd adjust his attitude, or that his perspective would change. And maybe he'd be like, you know what? Maybe I was getting a little too big for my britches. Maybe I should just be grateful that I'm getting to make a movie at all. But that is not Duffy's style. In fact, after the film was sold to franchise, he seemed to kind of double down on his convictions, convinced that the film that he was making was going to be an instant classic and award winner on par with Pulp Fiction. But as we're about to find out, he was about to very quickly be brought down to size. The Franchise Pictures was obviously a much smaller outfit than Miramax, which meant a much smaller budget. What had been a $15 million movie that was attracting big movie stars now had a budget closer to $6 million. So roughly a third of what he was going to get.
Yeah, he says in the commentary for the movie, Troy Duffy does, that, you know, money's always your biggest concern in independent filmmaking. But he says, you know, that $5 or $6 million that they ended up working with, he called that amount of money your own money, I think is the quote that he got. Is like, here, we're gonna give you some money, but that's it. That's
it. You're done.
Fuck off.
Yeah. Well, on the plus side, I guess, without a Harvey Weinstein to contend with, Duffy found that he was able to cast the film the way he wanted, so long as his proposed actors fit within this much smaller budget. In the end, the actors who were cast in the lead roles as Connor and Murphy McManus were Sean Patrick Flannery and Norman Reedus. Flannery's biggest claim to fame at this point was probably as the title character in the short-lived Young Indiana Jones Chronicles TV series from the early 90s. Did you guys ever watch that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I really liked it. I remember really liking it. And you had like the old Indiana Jones with the eye patch telling the stories. I thought it was pretty good.
Pirate
but
Indy.
So Sean Patrick Flannery played Indiana Jones in that series. I think it was a weird series. It wasn't like episodic. They were like mini movies of the week almost. They were like feature length or close to it from what I remember. But he had also had a fairly high profile role in the sleeper hit Powder opposite Jeff Goldblum and Lance Henriksen in 1995, which I remember liking.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
It's a good movie from what I remember, although Victor Salva is a problematic person.
Oh,
the director.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a convicted pedophile, is what he is.
Gotcha.
Not a good dude. Yeah. So, Norman Reedus, on the other hand, was practically an unknown at this time, having made his film debut a year earlier with a small part in Guillermo del Toro's Mimic, and the Boondock Saints' juiciest role, and honestly probably a sizable chunk of the movie's budget, went to its biggest name star. In the role of FBI agent Paul Smecker, Duffy was somehow able to snag Willem Dafoe. By the way, I just realized this earlier today, but his character's full name is Paul Smecker, which is definitely Duffy's attempt at a joke name, like Small Pecker, Paul Smecker, Small Pecker.
I definitely saw somewhere someone mention that.
Yeah.
I was like, is that a Duffy thing? Really? Like, did he do that?
It seems like a joke it seems like a joke he would make. I mean, there is a reason that this movie is popular amongst like 14-year-olds. right. Similar mentality with the director. Duffy did actually manage to secure one actor from his original wish list when he secured Sir Billy Connolly for the film as the legendary assassin Il Duce. I think that's Italian for the Duce.
The Duke.
I know, they say it in the movie. That was a Chris Farley joke.
I was going to say that's a solid Farley joke. Yeah,
it feels like Billy Connolly has no idea who he's working with based on, like when you see him in the documentary or just in general, like he's just a good spirited fella.
Just a nice,
like
just jolly.
And they said even that he I think this was the commentary they talked about, like he was having such a good time. He wanted to be a baddie. Like he just thought it was so cool to get to be like a tough guy, bad guy.
Because he's a comedian.
Yeah.
He always plays he doesn't play this kind of role. It's so weird seeing him in this.
Yeah, they said they had him do the cigar in the mouth or whatever because he wouldn't stop smiling. And so, he was just so happy all the time. And like you would have to like pull him away from like entertaining the crew with stories or something. And
that's great.
I also have a feeling that Billy Connolly, as sweet and cuddly as he may seem, I have a feeling that's the one person Duffy might be like, all right, he's cool. I won't fuck with him.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, he's a big fella, and
he's a big dude.
Yeah,
and he's got that wit, like you wouldn't want to piss off Bill Burr or something.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
you don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with Billy Connolly, like go on YouTube and look up some of his stand-up. Like he's one of the greats. I mean, he's I think he was actually officially named one year like the UK or maybe England. He's Scottish, but like England's greatest comic or something like that. Like he's gotten titles like that. It's like he's a legend. He really is. And I don't know why he's in this. But
I do love that Il Duce though is when he's all chained up, they're like he's like a ghost. So hard to try. But it's like everywhere he goes, he is like the most prominent fucking person you've ever seen. Like in the movie.
Dressing like Neo from the Matrix in the middle of a suburban neighborhood with 6 guns. Like you are not sneaking in and out, buddy. Like you are.
You will not forget any witnesses will not forget what that fucking guy looked like.
Oh, you mean the guy in all black leather trench coat with 6 guns with long flowing white hair and a cigar and sunglasses on? Yeah, that guy. That guy.
Exactly.
Oh man. Anyway, so Gerard Parks, best known as Doc on the Jim Henson TV series Fraggle Rock. We love Doc. He's a charming old man. I watched Muppet Family Christmas last night. He appears in that. Here he has a small but memorable role as a bartender who is also named Doc, oddly enough, who for whatever reason Duffy wrote as a character with Tourette's syndrome, which is a detail that has absolutely no bearing on the story.
I was going to say for the same reason that Small Pecker is a joke. It just wanted a character he thought it would be funny that just said fuck and whatever the one phrase
ass.
he says.
Ass.
Yeah, fuck ass.
Yeah. Like that.
Need a reason for him to say that.
Duffy thought it would be funny to hear an old man yell fuck ass. That's the only reason that this character has Tourette's. Like there's absolutely no reason otherwise. For the role of the mob boss, Papa Joe Iacovetti, Duffy cast a British-born Canadian actor named Carlo Rota, who, despite having the very Italian name of Carlo Dante Rota, I think gives one of the silliest Italian accents that I've heard in a very long time. I think he sounds ridiculous. It almost feels like to me that Duffy cast him solely based on his name, Carlo Dante Rota. Yeah, this is a great Italian actor I'm going to get for this role as this Italian mob boss. Just assuming like he was Italian without ever actually listening to him talk. Like that's what it feels like to me.
Probably not reading the very next line down on his resume. Of like, I'm British born. I'm from Canada.
Yeah. Anyway, so the most significant supporting role in the film, other than Willem Dafoe's character, of course, is that of the Saints' sidekick, David Della Rocca, aka the Funny Man, played by an actor named David Della Rocca, who Duffy knew because they worked at the same bar, and he wrote the role sort of for him. So I guess he just didn't bother coming up with an actual name for the character and just put him in the movie as himself. I don't know. Yep. To be fair, despite me being snarky, I do think Della Rocca actually gives one of the film's more entertaining performances. Like, he's fun to watch. He's pretty annoying, but that's also sort of the point of the character. But I think he is kind of fun to watch in it. And also Ron Jeremy's in there as a mafia henchman for some reason, probably because Duffy thought he was being edgy by casting Ron Jeremy in a role.
In the commentary, here's an exact quote on Ron Jeremy when he first shows up. It says, "If you're a couple watching the Boondock Saints together, chances are you both know who he is, but are you going to talk about it afterwards?" I don't know. That's what he says. That's his reasoning he gives. And so the answer is yes, what you just said. Yeah, it feels like it was just like, this is Ron Jeremy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got curious, and it turns out Ron Jeremy has one of the biggest IMDb pages I've ever seen. So just really quick, I want to play a little game, Price is Right style. I want you guys to guess how many acting, and I'm going to put quotes around acting, credits Ron Jeremy has on IMDb.
Oh man, because he does so many cameos and stuff too.
Yeah. So again, Price is Right style. So you got to guess the closest without going over.
Who gets to go first then? Because that's a big part of the strategy here.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's let Gary go first.
It's 206.
I'm going higher than that. I'm going 669.
For the record, I went 206 because that's how many bones are in the body. You know what I'm saying?
How many is it?
So you guys are off by a little bit. He has 1,630.
Jesus Christ.
Wow. I thought Justin's was ridiculous.
Yeah, I did too. And it was barely a little over half. Jeez.
Yeah. I was just like, holy shit.
That's insane. I mean, new podcast idea.
There we go. I mean, I've looked up a lot of like character actors for like Star Trek and stuff and seen some like pretty hefty resumes, but like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Wow. I guess to give him a little more credit from, this edgelord stuff he keeps doing, he does say in the commentary too, just as a little anecdote about Smecker, he says that he made him gay to like create this like at odds feeling with the Boston PD. But then by the end of the movie, it's like they just accept him for who he is. And then it's like not an issue that he's gay. It's like he was trying to solve homophobia or something.
Well, but then why did he make his gay character also homophobic?
Yeah, also a good point. He does also tell a story that the guy playing the priest in that one scene where they go into confession, I think, is named Jimmy Tingle, and he says in the later scene when Defoe is in drag, he says that Tingle, when he first saw that scene, says, "Oh, I know that girl. She's from Boston."
Whereas I watch that scene and I go, that is the most unconvincing woman, female impersonator that I've ever seen.
Or at the very least, you'd be like, that shit looks like Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. Well, with its much reduced budget, filming completely on location in Boston was no longer an option. So the film was primarily filmed in Toronto, with the production moving to Boston for some street scenes during the last week or so of the filming.
There's not no matter where you look, there's not a shit ton of great filming stories.
No, most of this movie's story is the before and the aftermath.
Yeah. The best stuff I remember from the commentary is like the church that they shot in. Most of the churches they asked wouldn't let them shoot in there because they would find out how violent the movie is.
And, makes sense.
Yeah,
and yet John Waters filmed the rosary job scene in a church.
Yeah, very odd. But they finally got, like, it was a Union Methodist Church in Boston let them shoot in there. So Methodist, I guess. But they said they did get, like, in Toronto where they're trying, I think it was like the Catholic church there or something. They said they got a 2-page letter from the Archdiocese of Toronto because of this, calling them the spawn of Satan, and the film was an instrument of his destruction.
Wow, excellent.
Wait,
he was right.
Of Satan's destruction or of Troy Duffy's?
Yeah, he said
destruction
quote,
perpetrated by Satan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
All right.
right.
Honestly, hard to disagree.
Yeah.
He also mentions, like, he got into it with franchise pictures, even though it was like you're on your own money. They apparently really did not like the scene with Connor throwing the toilet off the side of the building.
That's a pretty major scene. Why that of all the stuff in this movie? Why is that the one that they had an issue with?
Because he did it in slow motion, and they thought that it didn't look great in slow motion.
It doesn't. I mean,
so.
I mean, the toilet part looks fine in slow motion. The him jumping off the building in slow motion is way too drawn out. The way that it's done, like it just looks a little silly.
The way he tells the story, it almost sounds like there wasn't even, like, because he describes it as like they weren't a fan of that scene, and then on the spot, him and the editor, Bill Durand, like they shortened it up or something and, like, added some techno music over it or whatever they do there.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally Franchise Pictures was like, okay, fine, whatever. And
who gives a shit?
So they went with it, but it was just, I don't know. That's so interesting story that the one time studio interference happened, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that scene, weird. Not the scene where they are in a peep show and the guy is copping a fill on an unconscious woman. They didn't have a problem with that one, but the toilet dropping on a guy's head, they had an issue with.
Yep.
You almost have to think maybe it was just that bad. Like maybe it just really didn't look good at first.
Like the original version was that much worse. You mean?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Maybe.
They looked past that, Sean Patrick Flannery jumps 5 stories off the roof of that
And it's
building
fine.
and just,
I mean,
he just limps a little afterwards.
Yeah. He did land on a guy.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
the other guy softened the fall a little bit.
A little.
That's just science.
Yeah, exactly. That's physics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you watch the documentary overnight, what's kind of remarkable about it is that when you see Duffy on set, which isn't a lot, there's not a lot of stuff on actually on set in that documentary. But when you do see him on set, he kind of seems like okay. Like he does actually speak to his actors with respect and actually seems to know what he's doing, or at least he acts like he knows what he's doing. Like he's making decisions with a confidence that a lot of first-time filmmakers lack. And in interviews with Duffy, when he talks about actors and the ones that I found, like he actually does seem like he respects actors, or at least the actors who he doesn't consider, talentless fools like fucking Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, that he would. After we talked about that, I also remembered that there's the scene in Overnight where he is also talking to it's like at a bar or something. He's talking to the one girl who works for, like, Robert De Niro or something.
I think they wanted De Niro for Smecker for a little while.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, if you just showed him the script, he'd be into it or something." And she's like, maybe. I don't. But
it's her job not to give De Niro scripts like this.
Exactly. That's what she does. She filters everyone out.
Yep.
So the only, he acts the same way you're talking about. He acts that way a little bit in commentary too, like about directing, which is interesting. Like he talks about how, like, it's a little nerve-wracking to, like, be on set. The actors that are more experienced, like Willem Dafoe told him, this is the first time I've been with, like, a first-time director, like this. I've never done a film with somebody like that before. So he says, talks about feeling like the pressure of everybody waiting to see like how you're going to guide the film along or whatever. And so it's the only time I recall him having like that sense of that he felt some pressure and
that he's got any kind of humbleness at all.
Yeah, that he's a human being. And so And that's to say, like, even in the commentary too, because he 100%, anytime he can tell you his name, he will. Like, literally, I'm Troy Duffy. I wrote and directed Boondock Saints, and his name pops up in the credits. That's me. I'm Troy Duffy. And, but
it sounds like Robert Downey Jr. in the commentary for Tropic Thunder of like, oh, here I am. Everybody shut up.
Only one person is self-aware.
He's doing it to be funny. Exactly.
Right.
Anyway, but he does say, at least with the actual like in it part of it, he seems a little better than he does everywhere else.
Yeah, because anytime that he's not on set, when he's dealing with anyone behind the scenes, like producers, agents, even members of his own family, Duffy acts like a complete asshole. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like, he just acts like an asshole. He taunts, curses, insults, and is generally nasty to nearly everyone he comes in contact with, including his own mother. It's like he's kind of rude to his own mom. And that also includes the co-managers of his band, who he financially screws over once the band actually does land a record contract. He literally, in the documentary, tells them that they don't deserve a dime for the work that they've done for the band up to that point, before changing his tune to say, you know what, you do deserve it, you're just not going to get it. That's an exact quote from him in the documentary. And Duffy seems to think that, and this is kind of across the board, he seems to think that nobody deserves any recognition for anything, the band or the movie, except for himself. And he's not even the lead singer of the band. He's like the fucking guitar player. Like, not
the guitar player.
He's his brother's the lead singer. You know, at one point in the documentary, he literally says, another exact quote. This says a lot about his worldview, by the way. He says, "Success has nothing to do with how you live your life and how you treat your friends, really. If you got the goods, you got the goods, no matter what kind of fuck up you are."
I literally had that quote also down here to just like bring up at some point, because that one just like grated my fucking nerves. I was like, okay, fuck this guy. That was the point where I was like, okay, be snarky, Justin.
It tells you exactly who he is. It tells you exactly what kind of person he is. That it's like, he's like, fuck everyone else, basically. I'll do what I need to do. The problem is, though, that those guys that he screwed over, his band managers, these were also the guys that he hired to make a documentary about the making of the Boondock Saints. The documentary that eventually became overnight a movie that famously depicts Duffy as an egomaniacal asshole and may have single-handedly put his post-Boondock Saints career on ice. Oopsie.
Yeah.
Whoops. Maybe not the guys you should have screwed over.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, which, in a documentary, I guess you could, portray people in a certain way, but you give them the evidence or the ammo a little bit. And, so why piss off the guys who completely control your narrative through this whole process?
Right. Because, like, he was clearly acting like an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's stuff he says that even, no matter what the context, you're like, dude.
But the thing is, had he not pissed them off by screwing them over, they could have edited a lot of that shit out and made him look better.
Yep.
But
what kind of sweet poetic justice of just
and now there is not a conversation. You can't read a review of Boondock Saints or any kind of think piece about it that does not reference that documentary.
Yeah.
Because that documentary has become just as big a part of the story of the Boondock Saints as the film itself.
It's like Harvey Weinstein took care of the industry. This documentary took care of everybody else.
The public. Yeah.
Yeah, the
exactly.
public.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
that's true. It's crazy. And then and they even include the parts like with as in regards to the band, you mentioned his brother's the lead singer. They get, because of the process of this whole thing, like Jeff Baxter of like, he was in the Doobie Brothers and forget what other band he was in, but anyway, he is gonna help produce their album.
Yeah.
And he's in there, but at one point in an interview in the documentary, he even mentions that like he hates that there's this like contention with the brother, because he's like, because I don't know why he does this, but at one point he compares the band to like if the Beatles met Alice in Chains or something like that.
Sounds like something he would do, honestly.
Yeah. But Jeff Baxter is saying, like, I hate that they have this problem because, the younger brother, lead singer, he's the interesting part of the band. Like he's got a really cool voice, and I would be way less interested in all of this if he was not a part of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he says that in the documentary, and so you're like, oh, somebody should play that for Troy. When he's just like, fuck everybody, go if you want to.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm like, dude, nobody cares about your band unless you've got that band.
Yeah. And it's not because of your talent as a musician.
Right.
So the Boondock Saints was certainly not the blockbuster that Duffy had assumed it would become once it was finally released. So after making a brief debut in Denmark in November of 1999, which technically makes it eligible for this little class of 1999 series that we're doing. But after that, it was barely released in theaters in the U.S. I think it literally opened in 5 movie theaters nationwide in January of 2000 before quickly disappearing, a turn of events that Duffy blamed on the Columbine high school shooting in April of 1999. Although in some interviews, he also blames Harvey Weinstein for blocking the film's release. So, he's going to blame it on something.
That's what I was just thinking. I was like, I don't know about Columbine, maybe Weinstein.
I mean, I can see Columbine being an issue, but I literally haven't seen anyone else involved in the film mention that except for Troy Duffy.
Well, yeah, in the commentary, he goes into that too. It talks about like, the film released a few weeks after the shooting at Columbine. Movies like The Basketball Diaries and The Matrix were being shown on the news every day as examples of violence. He says like Boondock Saints didn't have a chance ever in theaters. It was basically blacklisted. But I was reading an article on Film School Rejects to give them credit, but like they point out, they're like, that's a cool story. Just to throw it out there, though, another film that came out like a week after Boondock Saints was Scream 3. That might make an argument. Also, The Matrix made $171 million domestic. So, sure, believe Columbine if you want.
To be fair, The Matrix came out a month before Columbine. Matrix came out in March. Columbine happened in April. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's Duffy making excuses, I think, is what it is. I think the truth is that Franchise Pictures was a hole in the wall distribution. Well, they didn't even distribute it. I think they just produced it. Somebody else distributed it. But I think it was just a movie that wasn't that marketable. Honestly, it feels like a direct-to-video movie, so they essentially released it direct-to-video. After giving it probably a contractually obligated, very small theatrical run, if I were to guess.
To be completely fair, I do wholeheartedly believe Harvey Weinstein crushed everything involving this movie after 100%. He was out.
Yeah.
I have zero doubt that nobody wanted to touch this movie after Harvey passed.
You're right.
on it.
Absolutely. I 100%. This movie became poisoned as soon as they pissed off Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, everything about it's just like, no, he had too much power. He didn't want to do it. And even there's in the documentary again, there's the one reporter who's, I forget who she's with, but she talks about going
the Washington Post.
Yeah, the Washington Post. And she goes to whatever award show or whatever. She's like there, and she goes up to Harvey to talk to him. It was like, I'm so and so with Washington Post. And he's just like, hey, I know you. Wasn't I right about Boondock Saints? It's bullshit or something,
Yeah.
And then, like, she was like, he has like 7 movies here getting awards.
And that's what he wanted to bring up.
And he wanted to make sure to point out Boondock Saints was trash.
Yep. Well, it wasn't until the movie was released on home video that most people began discovering it. It was actually released at Blockbuster under a label they had called Blockbuster Exclusive, which was a series of independent direct-to-video films, basically, that I guess you could only get at Blockbuster. But once it was released on DVD, the movie became a word-of-mouth sensation among 16-year-old idiots everywhere, gaining a bona fide cult following. So I think it's pretty obvious how we feel about this movie, but let's really dig into our thoughts on it. So first of all, Gary, this was your pick for this series. And I'm curious why, out of all the movies that we had on our list for 1999, why did you pick the Boondock Saints?
I'll be vulnerable for a second. Just be real with you. I loved this movie.
When you were younger? Yeah,
Yeah.
when it first came out.
No, last night when I watched it for the fifth time this month. No, I just remember in college just being a fan of this movie. I remember exactly who showed it to me. My buddy came over and was like, "You got to check this movie out." And he was like my bar fight macho friend, Jake. I think you guys might know him. I'll just say his name. But anyway, and he's like, "Dude, have you seen Boondock Saints?" I'm like, "No, I haven't seen Boondock Saints." "Oh, fuck, dude, you got to check this out." And we watched it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's so badass." And well, I guess we could get into like the why of it a little bit more later, but it's just I remember loving this movie. And every time after I have like that college time, like that I've watched it, it lessens each time I watch it that like I actually think that I like it. Like it's like this last time I was like, I'm going in open mind. I know I loved this movie. And this time I was like, I do not like this movie at all. Like I don't like honestly, I think it's kind of boring. And,
Yeah, 100. I agree with that.
And I hate that I do because I I feel like probably for guys like Sean Patrick Flannery and Norman Reedus and Billy Connolly and like those kind of guys, Willem Dafoe, those kind of guys, like for every account you ever hear of them, they're like great people and they're nice and they're cool and just like the best dudes in the world. And you're like, I want to love it. Like it should be fun. And I don't know. Every time I watch it now, I'm just like, I don't like this movie. Like it's not
so
it's not good.
cringy. It's so cringy.
Yeah, it feels like a try hard edgelord, like over the top, just like it's like sadly like a movie I might have had a part in 1999.
Yeah,
and
right.
So it's just I don't think it holds up, and I still feel like it has like a legacy, like it has a cult classic legacy, like that people still talk about it to this day. So to round it out, the reason I picked it, I think, is because I still feel like it's talked about, and a lot of people still talk about it like it's great. And I was intrigued by that part. And also, I knew I had seen Overnight way back and been like, this fucking guy, this is the story altogether. So it just felt like, here's a movie that, for better or worse, is a part of history that deserves to be discussed on our show and has a story that would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, well, which is fair. I mean, not every movie that we discuss has to be like a great film. We've talked about stinkers on the show before, obviously, and but it's got a hell of a story behind it, and it does have a huge following, and there are people who genuinely like love this movie. So it's fun to dig into and to figure out, well, what is it about this movie? What is it that people are finding appealing about it? Now, Todd, what is your history with the Boondock Saints?
Honestly, it's very similar to Gary's. I mean, you guys, both of you are a couple years older than me, so I discovered it maybe
Don't remind me.
I discovered it probably junior or senior year of high school, I think.
What year did you graduate? 2001?
2002.
2002.
Yep. A friend at school. Again, have you seen Boondock Saints? Nope. Oh, you'll love it. Okay, great. Watched it. Yeah, loved it. And I would watch it maybe once every 5 years or so. And it was always just kind of like, oh yeah, fun. The shooting.
How did you like it the first time you watched it?
Oh, the first time I was into it. I was like,
you're like
oh,
16, 17 years old, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't watched it in a long, long time, and going back, because I knew, for this episode, I knew that we were going to discuss the documentary, which I hadn't seen. And we were also going to discuss a little bit, not to, get too far ahead, but we were going to discuss at least briefly the sequel, which I had seen.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to jump into all this. And as I started watching the first one, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to watch anything else because I think I've got enough to talk about with this movie alone.
She didn't watch Overnight?
I didn't watch Overnight, and I didn't rewatch Boondock Saints 2. And my reasoning for not watching Boondock Saints 2 was, and I mean, it's not a secret that my tastes are very different from you guys. It's a rare occasion when we overlap of like, oh yeah, this movie. But I recall Boondock Saints 2, watching it and being so disappointed, and it failed to recapture any of the stuff that I felt with the first one. It failed to ignite my imagination or my enthusiasm.
So why subject yourself to a rewatch?
Bingo. Exactly.
I think if I actually, you say that reminds me, I think that's when I first started to have that like realization. Because I think when Boondock Saints 2 was coming out, and I didn't rewatch Boondock Saints 2 for this. I just didn't have time. But like, I remember when Boondock Saints 2 getting exciting, like trying to get excited that like Boondock Saints 2 was coming out, and I rewatched Boondock Saints to get ready for Boondock Saints 2. And on that watch of Boondock Saints being like,
not what I remembered.
That's not what I remembered. Yeah, I don't. Weird. I don't feel as great about this as I thought I did. And then watching Boondock Saints 2 and being like, I definitely did not like that. And
yeah. So when it came to watching this, my thought process, like as I was going through this and kind of prepping myself for the recording today, it was just kind of like, this makes me think of the types of movies that really hit at a particular time in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you revisit them years later and are so disappointed. Maybe that there's a bit of that nostalgia. We've talked about the dangers of nostalgia before, and things like that. But, trying to zero in on movies that are like this, I feel like a lot of we mentioned Kevin Smith's, his work. Clerks was definitely made at a time in his life where he could tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to a generation of a particular age, but also of a particular background growing up. And I feel like this speaks to the mindset. I mean, we've already mentioned a lot, the type of jokes that are told, with the names and different, I'm going to get this guy from the Muppets and he's going to say fuck and ass every other sentence. Like, that's something a 14-year-old would do. That's exactly the type. It's that SNL skit of like, oh, that'll move the chains. Like, that's what you do when a 14-year-old gets a mic in front of them. They do that type of shit. But it also made me think of, I mean, it is not the same. So bear with me when I make this comparison, but it also kind of reminds me of Fight Club a little bit, where like, there was a type of person when Fight Club came out that was really, really, really into Fight Club for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. The guys who misunderstand Fight Club are the same guys who loved this movie.
Yes.
I held back on the discussion part because I was like, I was thinking in my head, I don't want to step on anybody's like potential further viewing or something like that. But I was going to say, like, I don't think that the people who initially like this or anything are going into this with bad intentions, or like they're bad people, or like something's wrong with them necessarily.
Yeah.
I see the parts why they appeal in the same way as Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% thought of Fight Club. I was like, whereas this movie embraces the elements that Fight Club like flips on its head.
It's the stuff that Fight Club is satirizing, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, we've talked about Fight Club, and I was like, actually, that was perfect for this one. That like Fight Club is completely like the opposite movie of Boondock Saints, and it's interesting in that way. Like I totally get why you would say the comparison.
Yeah, the thing is that David Fincher, I'm just going to put this out there, smarter and more talented. That's Troy Duffy.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, if we were to be dicks about it,
there's that.
I just don't I don't know where like the point is. You start talking about like how far is too far. Like we get into this whole discussion, but with Fight Club, I think I talked about this a little bit. But like, for whatever reason, I'm wrapped up in the political world and like all this other stuff, and I see these like other people that like there's the manosphere online that is like kids like dudes when they're especially at like this certain age, like at the other end of high school or like going into college, like all this, especially those guys. But even nowadays, like I'm an old fuck, but like even nowadays, when you're 14 years old, I think it starts to hit you too. There is a lot of struggle over what is a man and what does it mean to be a man and what's that about? Like what is macho, what is cool, and like all of that stuff. And I feel as though, you know, that was even happening to us back then. It's even more so now why you get like the Andrew Tates and the, you know, like people look to Jordan Peterson or whoever else to like guide you in the ways, you know, and probably guys need more help with like better influencers that also try to, I know there are some out there that try to like help guide younger men along, you know, in different ways than the far right leaning kind of things or whatever. But anyway, this is part of that. Like, I don't know that I would have known it until now, like how much I realized looking back that I'm like, whoa, why did I like Boondock Saints so much? And I think part of it was that it does appeal. On the surface, the easy answer is it's just cool. Like vigilante justice and like blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing that you could say about Punisher or, you know, any of those movies or any of those books or movies or whatever, that it's like you get revenge on the bad guy and it's very obvious who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. It's just like this fantasy, right? Like you get to be the tough guy who serves justice. You're the good, upstanding person that beats down the bullies and all of that stuff. That's the surface level stuff of it. But then there's like this, I don't know, there's this other part of it that's like, what does it mean to be macho, to be tough, to be like my brother? I'm gonna get with my brother. We're gonna go beat up the bad guys and like we're
each
tough.
other with meat.
Yeah, yeah, smack each other with meat. That was a dick reference, I guess. Anyway, I don't want to drag it on too long, but basically, like I feel like this was a part of that. Like we didn't know what it was back then, but that manosphere kind of thing that like you just felt like this was a dude's movie, and it just felt good to watch. It's cool, people shooting each other up and just saying fuck a lot, and like dirty jokes and all of that stuff. And
but I think that's why it appealed so much to like younger people, teenagers, and things like that.
Yeah, I think looking at it, because again, I was never really politically minded, and I feel like a lot of kids aren't politically minded until they get to about that age. And you're seeing this stuff on the news or wherever about the evils of the world, and you have this very simple mindset of like, well, let's just kill them. And so this movie completely speaks to that, but at the same time, it's weird. You know, if ever someone's spirit and attitude were actually captured on film, I feel like it's this movie. I know Justin's mentioned things that are made in a mean spirit, and I feel like this is made in a very mean spirit. Like
it is.
Well, and Todd, if you rewatch Overnight, by the way, Troy Duffy, like just watching him, he is constantly smoking cigarettes and wearing a peacoat and just like, you know, like this is his fantasy. Spot.
This is what he thinks is cool. It is a very mean-spirited movie. The thing is, like, a lot of people, this is kind of goes back to what both of y'all were talking about. Like, I think a lot of people who enjoyed this movie, who would consider themselves fans of this movie, discovered it when they were very young, and honestly, their taste had probably not developed yet. Because this is a movie that is appealing to like a 14, 15, 16-year-old. But that's where you have to realize that if those same people were to like this now, if they were to go back and say, man, I still love the Boondock Saints, then A, you either have terrible taste, or B, you're being blinded by nostalgia. And what you really like is the feeling that you had when you were 14 years old. But if you watch this movie objectively, like, it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's a bad movie. I mean, hands down, it is. There's nothing clever about it. Its plot is incomprehensible. Honestly, it's filled with cringe-inducing dialogue that you can just picture Troy Duffy writing and like laughing at himself, thinking he's so clever and so funny, thinking he's just the coolest dude in town. The most, I mean, he's definitely trying to do a Tarantino thing here. Like consciously trying to do a Tarantino thing here. And his most tricky, like Tarantino type of storytelling device is when he shows Willem Dafoe walking through the aftermath of the Saints' crime and then flashing back to the events themselves. That's like his idea of clever storytelling. But the problem with that is that it makes those investigations completely redundant. Like, because we already know like who the killers are and what they did. Like, there's no mystery there. And then he just does that for every single crime. Like, every single crime scene, we get an investigation walkthrough, we get a flashback. We get an investigation walkthrough, we get a flashback. Let's just do the same shit over and over for the whole movie. It's basically having Willem Dafoe's character explain something to the audience that they already know, which is silly and honestly kind of lazy writing. Luckily, those scenes they're actually some of the most watchable in the film because of Willem Dafoe, who is the best thing about this movie and probably the only actor alive who can pull off some of the things that he's asked to do without looking like a total bonehead. I mean, his character, as written, is very cringy, very homophobic. It's very much a caricature. But Dafoe does bring a lot of camp to his performance. Like, he kind of knows that and brings a lot of camp to his performance. That's pretty fun to watch. I mean, that we joked about it earlier, I think before we started recording, but the scene where he's conducting the shootout, there was a firefight, that scene is honestly a very silly scene and very over the top, but it's one of my favorite scenes in the film because Dafoe is fully committed to the bit in that scene. Like, he has just gone off the rails, and it's fun to watch him, even though the context of everything else around him is kind of dumb.
Bro, I was watching this movie and this last time and thinking, if Willem Dafoe was not here, there's nothing salvageable.
Yeah.
Like, I still, because I know you're saying like it's a repeat over and over, like, just with each of his scenes, but it's like, I didn't get tired of him.
No, you don't. Agreed.
I was like, I'm with him. I think the premise of the story is kind of cool. Like, it almost feels like an anime or something that like could work, or a remake could work. Like, if somebody better did it, that like that like these brothers get involved and they think they're being led by God to like take out these bad guys, and then maybe they are because they keep getting lucky or something. And they, and do this like questionable. There's this detective hot on their tail that like is unorthodox and loves listening to classical music as he works on a crime scene. I don't hate any of those ideas.
Conceptually.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Conceptually.
It's the execution and the way that they're written, though, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just like watching it back, you're like, well, that's not how I envisioned it if you had told me that. And but Willem Dafoe is the best part of it because he does seem to lean into it. Like a lot of movies like this, like if you, because I was thinking in my head, sorry, I just stepped all over your discussion part, but was that I feel like there's an argument like people would make that what about 80s movies like like Death Wish, or especially the later Death Wishes, or like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or Sylvester Stallone or something like Cobra or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but those movies, I don't feel like they take themselves as seriously as this movie is trying to take itself.
100%. Yeah.
And so it's like, and Willem Dafoe seems to be the only person not taking himself as seriously as everything else in the movie. And so it's like, he's the fun one.
Yeah.
And it's like, but for some reason it feels like there's like they're really trying to push a heavy-handed something in there that's like, that doesn't fit in this movie, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what this is.
Yeah, and Willem Dafoe is so fun to watch that it actually makes the Saints themselves come across as kind of boring. Like they're kind of boring characters.
Yeah.
The performances are fine. I think Sean Patrick Flannery is fine. I think Norman Reedus is whatever. He seems like a nice guy, but I also think he's been playing the same character for the last 25 years, only this time he has an Irish accent. So if you hire Norman Reedus, that's who you're getting. You're getting that character. He doesn't have a lot of range. I don't think.
I want to say it's a questionable Irish accent. Like,
it's not the best. It's not the best Irish accent.
He has an accent.
Yeah. They're also upstaged by David De La Rocca, who, at least gives a big fun performance. He's not as fun as Defoe, but he's more lively than the Saints themselves, who almost feel like supporting characters in their own movie. Mm. And the thing is, the movie is also, and this probably goes back to Troy Duffy not truly having anything to say, but this movie is weirdly hypocritical. Like Duffy seems to, obviously he sides with the Saints. Like the Saints to him are the heroes. They're the heroes of the story. He never questions the work that they're doing. There's no moralizing. There's no questioning whether or not what they're doing is right or wrong. Like murdering people. They're the good murderers. There's bad murderers and they're good murderers. And in his story, they're the good murderers. And in his story, he seems to fully believe that they really are doing like the Lord's work. And this goes back to that quote from him at the beginning of this episode where he was talking about what inspired him to write this. And yet we see them doing drugs with De La Rocca while murdering drug dealers. They laugh when he accidentally kills a cat. Like that scene where he accidentally shoots the cat, which is definitely Duffy's attempt at doing the scene like Marvin getting shot in the face in Pulp Fiction. Like he's trying to do something like that, but doing it his own way, which means it's not funny at all. And you're just like, that's fucked up. Like this is like, you just killed a cat. And then they're laughing at it. And we're supposed to think that they're the heroes of this story. He condemns people who go to peep shows in the movie, like to the point where he suggests that they deserved to die. And yet he casts Ron Jeremy in a key role in the film. So it's like it's weirdly hypocritical, and I think it's just because Troy Duffy doesn't really have a point of view, and he's just doing things that he thinks other people are going to think is cool. And I think that's the thing. The whole movie reeks of someone who's trying too hard to be cool and too hard to be trendy without actually understanding why something is cool or how it becomes trendy. He's just seeing something that other more talented people have done and saying, hey, I could do that. And then has the audacity to think that that's all it takes is to ape somebody else without actually having a voice of your own.
It feels like the thing that you said earlier about when he was deciding the story structure of like, here's how the beginning goes and then bunch of cool shit and we get to the end. It's like he's definitely doing like a bunch of cool ideas in the middle, but he doesn't know how to connect them all or make it matter or make
a bunch of cool moments doesn't make a story.
Right, right.
It doesn't make a story, and there's not much here to. There's not much connective tissue between any of that.
I feel like if he had picked a point of view, either tell this story from the view of the Saints, or tell this story from the cops investigating. Pick one, because jumping back and forth, clearly,
who are we supposed to root for?
Right. He doesn't have the writing chops to pull that off. Mm-mm. He doesn't have any chops really to pull off the type of story that he would have ultimately been trying to make. I don't know. I feel like I sound dumber trying to describe this dumb movie.
Well, I mean, basically what he's doing here is he doesn't have an original bone in his body is the problem. Yeah. He's taking ideas from other movies and just kind of redoing them. It's not like how Quentin Tarantino pulls ideas from other movies to use inspiration from those movies. Like Tarantino will pull stuff from another movie and he uses that as inspiration to tell his own stories and to tell them in a unique way that only he could. Like anybody else could pull from the same movies that Tarantino's pulling from, and they're not going to make Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? And Troy Duffy is just trying to do his own version of things that other people have done without actually having a reason for it or without trying to do his own thing with it. He's just a ripoff artist. Even the title of the film is stupid. Like, why are they called the Boondock Saints? I mean, that's clearly him trying to do his version of the Reservoir Dogs. That's why he called them that. Like, it sounds very similar. But
Man, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, but first of all, they're in Boston. Does he not know what the word boondocks means? Boston is not the boondocks, but Boston is the city. Boondocks are out in the boonies, out in the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere. It's like he just pulled the word out of a hat. Boondock Saints. It sounds cool, but also the word is boondocks. It's plural. Like, it's not even the right word. Like, why are they called that?
I just tried to Google this because I'm like, wait, why did he say boondock? I never even got to thinking about that part.
They never say it in the movie.
There's nothing with like boondocks in Boston.
No, there's nothing. The word boondocks and the word and the town of Boston have no correlation. He could have called them the Beantown Saints and it would have made more sense.
I think I assumed that there was something about Boston that I didn't know.
Yeah, no,
boondocks.
It's just
something.
a word he picked out of a hat. Like, it's so stupid. Like, why? No, you mentioned the ending. Let's talk about the ending. Can we talk about the ending?
Yeah.
Well, there's not much to talk about because he didn't write a fucking ending to this movie.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I'm really not trying to just play devil's advocate, but each of these, there are things from each scene in this movie that I feel like could, Troy, if you're listening, I'm sorry I sound like such an ass to you, but you were an ass to your friends, to be fair. I hate it because I feel like there is a lot of stuff. I feel like I could see what Harvey Weinstein might have seen in this script. Like, that there were like interesting aspects to it, that like there could have been a badass.
Yeah, I feel like if this script had been given to another screenwriter to rewrite and to polish up a little bit, it could have been something good, honestly.
And so if you had told a cool story, that I feel like the real story would be like the questioning of, are these good? Are they, anointed by God, or are they
make them
just
morally
fucking murderers?
ambiguous. Exactly. Exactly.
And then you lead up to the courtroom scene where they end up murdering a mafioso, like in front of a bunch of people and making them watch it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not a terrible ending to if you had done a cool movie. Like,
yeah, it just feels so anticlimactic. Like, it feels so anticlimactic by that point, because he does this big reveal where we find out that Il Duce is their father. That's his twist, because he had to throw a twist in here, and it's not a twist
fucking out of nowhere.
And it doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter. Like, we find out that he's their father, but why? And also, did he genetically pass down his ability to be an assassin to them? Like, they've never met the guy.
Yeah.
Like,
and also, like, in every place you've seen him prior to this, he's like, does not stop for anything to he's just immediate. His immediate first thing he does in any room is pull out a gun and shoot people.
Right.
And then, like, for some reason on this one, he's like, I'm just going to peek in here. And, I heard a prayer. These must be my boys.
Yeah. It's, and that prayer, the fact that they keep doing that over and over throughout the film, it's their thing. But that feels like Troy Duffy is like, it's like he watched the Ezekiel 25:17 scene from Pulp Fiction and just think of that and just made an entire, just turned that into an entire movie without actually understanding the scene.
He did. Yes.
He's like, that's a cool thing for an assassin to do. It's like, yeah, but did you watch the last scene in the movie? Did you watch the last scene of Pulp Fiction, or did you just watch him do it the first time? Like, because and then the actual ending of the movie is these like man on the street interviews, a la Natural Born Killers, which we see all throughout that movie, only with much worse acting this time. And then
son of a bitch, I didn't think of that either. Wow.
And then movie just like, it just ends. It just ends with those interviews. Like, it's so so dumb.
And the only person you can ever see him credit, and this was from the commentary, I believe, he mentions John Woo
Yeah.
You know?
And the only scene that's remotely similar to a John Woo scene is the one where they're spinning upside down when they, which
Well,
is
I was
just
going to say
them-
this during that he says
Yeah.
something about, taking from John Woo, and then it's like,
You can definitely
okay,
tell,
but-
only it's not done as well as John Woo would have done it, obviously, who is one of the greatest action directors of all time.
Not to mention that scene involves the you text me during this the fat mafioso who is just a guy in a fat suit.
Why
Like,
is that
did
just
they
a guy in a fat suit?
guy?
There's plenty of fat guys. They could have cast any fat guy. He barely has to talk in the scene. They call this guy the Fat Man. For no reason. There's no reason he needs to be fat other than they call the character the Fat Man, but then they just pick a thin guy in a very bad fat suit. Like, it's just like his belly. It's just like a big belly. It's not like a whole prosthetic. It's just a big belly.
Yeah.
It's so silly. Like, why is this like a friend of yours that you promised you would put him a part in the film, and the only thing open was the Fat Man, but he wasn't fat, but we had to keep that in the script?
Yes.
Revealed in the commentary.
Right. That's it.
This is my friend Josh. I told him he could be in the movie, and we'd cast everything except for the Fat Man, but we already filmed the scenes where they called him the Fat Man, so we had to go buy a fat suit at the costume shop down the street.
I gotta tell you, he gave us $150 on Patreon and just said, I want to be in a movie and I want to be fat. And so we made it happen.
Oh man. So while the film did eventually find an audience through word of mouth, I mean, this was a movie, it could only be word of mouth because it had practically no advertising. But that good word of mouth that it was getting did not come from critics, because the reviews of this film, they were bad. Like, critics loathed this film. It was not a critical hit by any means. So people weren't seeing it because of that. They were seeing it because their pal Jimmy from geometry class told them it was cool. That was the reason that they watched this.
There is no shortage of online and everywhere else reviews of this movie that are like with like pro critics. This is what they do. That are, why does everybody love this movie?
Right. Yes, that's the gist of a lot of them, especially more modern reviews. It's like, why? What did anyone ever see in this?
Why is this so popular?
Well, despite reviews, the film was a success. But despite its success, Duffy claims that he never saw any profits from the film, and that neither he, his producers, or his principal cast ever got paid, which actually led Duffy to sue Franchise Pictures. And after a lengthy legal battle, Duffy, his producers, and cast received an undisclosed amount of Boondock Saints royalties, as well as the sequel rights.
He didn't, when he signed that deal with Franchise Pictures, I feel like it covers this in the documentary as well. He just signed on to get the movie made, and like no sequel rights, no like distribution, no merchandise, like no nothing.
Yeah, and it went through distribution through, I think it's called Indaka is the name of the company. And when they signed, when the distribution deal was made, the deal was made between Indaka and Franchise, and it didn't include any profits from any home video stuff for the people who actually made the film.
It's just hitting me now as we've gone through this whole thing and we've all had the conversation, but let's think about that for a second. For like this guy who just got everything fucking handed to him by Harvey Weinstein. And I don't mean this for like praise for Harvey Weinstein, but I mean, like he was demanding whatever the fuck he wanted. And now he's getting a percentage or a fraction of the money, and not even getting anything that comes after. Like nothing on the back end of this movie at all.
Yeah, karma's a bitch. Like that's it's he fucked around and he found out. Basically, is what happened there.
He sure did.
This could have been a huge thing. He could have made millions of dollars off of it if he had just played his cards right. But he had to be an asshole about it.
Insane. And the worst part is, just to be clear, all of those friends that quit their jobs and like came along for the ride that also got fucked in the process because they believed in him. And
they were like the collateral damage from his ego, essentially. But he did eventually get the sequel made. he got those sequel rights back, and he was able to get a sequel made. The sequel is called Boondock Saints 2 All Saints Day, was released in 2009, almost a decade after the original movie, and it saw several of its cast members from the first film return, including Flannery, Reedus, and Connolly, with the addition of Clifton Collins Jr., Julie Benz, and inexplicably Peter Fonda, with a weird Italian accent in the cast.
Why?
Now, like its predecessor, Boondock Saints 2 received mostly negative reviews, but was a modest financial success, which for a while led to serious talks of a third film in the series. So, not long after the release of Part 2, Duffy announced that the working title for the third film was Boondock Saints 3, Saints Preserve Us. He later mentioned that Flannery and Reedus would be returning for the third film. A few years later, it's like 2013 or so, he confirmed that a script for the third film was in the works. He was writing it, in addition to a possible TV series called The Boondock Saints Origins, which, judging from the title, sounds like it'd be a prequel, I guess, right? Which is odd considering the first film shows us the formation of the Saints, and the second film gives us their father's backstory. So I don't know what Origins could have. Who knows what the hell he was doing? But anyway, in 2014, it was reported that the third film, now titled Legion, Boondock Saints 3 Legion, was in pre-production. But then in 2017, Sean Patrick Flannery sent out a tweet saying that he and Reedus were in no way involved in either the TV show or the third film, because all the news of the third film had hit all the trades, so basically indicating that they'd walked away from the project or the franchise completely. But as recently as March of this year, 2024, it was confirmed that the third film in the franchise is once again on, but it was also reported that Duffy would not be returning to direct. So it makes me think like Flannery, something happened back in 2017. Flannery and Reedus walked away. They didn't want to be involved in the project anymore. And it sounds to me like this is all speculation on my part, but it sounds to me like they decided to return for a third film as long as Duffy wasn't involved, or because Duffy wasn't involved, they're like, all right, then we'll do it. That's what it sounds like to me. Again, pure speculation on my part,
Yeah.
but Flannery he hasn't gone into a lot of detail. Back in that 2017 tweet, he didn't really go into a lot of detail, but there was speculation that there was some stuff behind the scenes that he didn't agree with.
So I found an article from Screen Rant that, and also confirmed by Collider, that this was October of this year, 2024, as we're recording. Screen Rant was doing an interview with Flannery and asked him about this movie, and said Norman Reedus had a huge part in this apparently, but said, quote, "That motherfucker texted me last night. He's one of my best friends. Solid dude. Can't say that about a lot of people in Hollywood, but that is a solid motherfucker. One of the best dudes. And he's been a dear friend of mine since 94. We shot Boondock Saints in 99. We're shooting next year between March and August."
Yeah. So March of 2025, they're going to be shooting the third film. But the thing is, like, there's been no announcement about who's actually directing the movie or writing the movie.
It says Thunder Roads Pictures, who did the John Wick series, is taking over.
But none of the articles mention a director. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh yeah. I don't know about the director part. I don't know. It's weird. It's like they've just taken it from Troy Duffy and moved on.
Yeah, it honestly sounds that way. Troy Duffy apparently owns some rights to it and wants to continue to write Boondock, like continue the story of the Saints in a series of books.
Okay.
I cannot imagine him writing good books, but based on his screenwriting. Anyway, well, Duffy has continued to pursue filmmaking over the years with very little success, obviously. With the exception of the Boondock Saints sequel, he's yet to direct another film, and no screenplay that he's written has been produced, with the sole exception of a 2020 comedy film called Guest House that stars Pauly Shore and Steve-O and has a 4.4 rating on IMDb. And he didn't direct that one, he just wrote it. Yeah, right. As for Duffy's band, if you want a little where are they now on that one, or how did things go with their band after they signed their big record deal? Their record deal, by the way, it was with a label called Lava Records, which is actually a subsidiary of Atlantic Records, the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest record label on the planet, Atlantic Records. So they signed with Lava Records to release an album. And after changing the name of the band from The Brood to what else but the Boondock Saints, they actually changed the name of the band to the Boondock Saints. Their debut album, Release the Hounds, was released on April 11th, 2000. The album sold an impressively pitiful 690 copies in its first 6 months of release. The band was quickly dropped by their record label and broke up not long afterwards.
All 690 copies of those are in Troy Duffy's car, which he is currently living in.
They're probably all at Goodwill.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the band for a second, but I don't really know what to say.
They're not good. I mean, I've listened to several songs from that album, and there's one song called Fat Man, which presumably is about the guy from the movie, which I sent you a link to when we were talking about that. But yeah, it's just very bland, like kind of butt rocky stuff. It's not good.
Yeah, it feels like very much a product of like that time. Like
it's impressively mediocre.
You know what it is? It's essentially like the music equivalent of like what Boondock Saints was for like movies at the time.
Just doing what other people are doing with no real originality.
Yeah. And despite what anybody would tell you, like he says in the commentary, he had points where he had like songs in mind for Boondock Saints, so it wasn't like his band doing it. It was originally like he wanted, like for instance,
I think he wanted the Led Zeppelin and the Doors and like a bunch of bands.
Yeah, he wanted When the Levee Breaks, like playing in an early scene with like Willem Dafoe.
Led Zeppelin, like one of the most expensive bands to get licensed for
they
a movie.
Wanted $17 million for 30 seconds of the song, and that's where I think he even actually talked about. But I had this much money, and that's your own money, and we didn't have enough to cover that, so it didn't happen. It's like when they come in the house, like I think the rope scene, I want to say, or somewhere there, he wanted like 5 to 1 by the Doors. There was another one in there too. All of them wanted like 17 million, which I guess he said at the time was like standard for like bigger bands like that or something.
Well, for Led Zeppelin, which they are notoriously one of the most expensive bands to get licensed for a movie.
Yeah. So, I don't know. He had like ideas for like certain songs. I remember Supernatural wanted like Ramble On for Dean at one point or something. But yeah, it was just too much. But
too expensive.
If he'd been nicer to Harvey Weinstein, maybe.
Maybe. Didn't happen. Well, that, fellas, I think is the story of the Boondock Saints. I think we've told about as much as we can about this movie. It's been a fun time. Thank you for joining us. Do you guys want to, actually, before we do our little sign off, we need to tell people, because this episode will be coming out a couple of days before this event, but our next live event is on December 17th, Coffee Underground in Greenville, South Carolina. We are showing Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, so it's going to be fun. We're going to do live commentary with our friend Glitterous, a local drag queen who helps us put on these shows, and it's going to be very, very fun. It's going to be a good time. We're going to be silly, and it's going to be the Cinema Shock Christmas extravaganza. Coffee Underground tickets are like $12. You can buy them online. Just go to cinemashock.net, click on events, and you'll find a link to where you can buy those tickets. And if you're anywhere nearby, please come celebrate Christmas with us. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
we're gonna watch a bad movie together.
We're getting into the Christmas spirit, and we're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be a goofy Christmas fun time.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. So where can you guys be found on the internet?
I'm at This Is Gary Horn on all of the things. I don't know why I had trouble saying that.
If you like Dungeons and Dragons, I host an actual play show called D's 20, where comedians and drag performers play D&D in front of a live audience. Info and tickets are available at eventbrite.com. My show, Computer Resume Podcast, covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order, is available wherever you get your podcasts and at Computer Resume on all of the socials and Patreon. And I'm at Mr. Todd A. Davis on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, and D&D Beyond, as long as they behave themselves.
Well, and I am at Justin_Bishop on most of the things. We are also at Cinema_Shock on most of the things except for Blue Sky, who doesn't allow underscores, but we are on Blue Sky now. I've been having a lot of fun over there. So if you like many other people have recently signed up for Blue Sky, please come find me. Come find Cinema Shock. There's a really great film community on Blue Sky that I've found. There's some really great people on there. So you can find us at cinemashock.net as always. Rate, review, all that bullshit. Tell your friends. If your friends like the Boondock Saints, maybe don't send them this episode, but send them like one of the other ones.
and consider getting new friends.
Yeah, and also, of course, cinemashock.net/plus for all the extra bonus shit.
And again, thank you to all of the people subscribing already. We do appreciate it.
We very much appreciate it. It is excellent that people would want to throw any money our way. And we hope that we are giving I think we're giving some pretty damn good bonus content, because I listen to them as I edit, and I say, you know what, I would pay for this if I weren't the one doing it. It's good. It's honestly good shit, and we do really appreciate everyone who has subscribed so far. And if you're looking for some Christmas gifts, you can join Cinema Shock Plus, buy some Cinema Shock merch for a little bit cheaper than normal, and give it to your grandma. She'll appreciate it.
Grandmas love us.
Your grandma appreciates everything we do.
Well, until next time. Oh, wait. Next movie. We haven't announced our next movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the third and final movie in our little wrap up 2024 series, which is going to be my pick. It's my pick.
I was going to say, I was like, I don't even think I know what the next movie is.
My pick. From 1999, a movie I'm very excited to talk about because the story behind it is fascinating. The movie is a movie that I love. It's a found footage horror movie. You know what?
Why am I the only person? Like me and Todd, like I picked a movie I hated, and Todd picked a movie he loved, and you picked a movie you loved. I picked a movie I don't like.
But you could have picked any movie, and that's just what you went with. But it's been a fun time talking about it.
It's been fun. I've had fun. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm excited about this one too.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time too. We are talking about The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Absolutely iconic found footage horror movie. One of the most important movies in the genre. I'm very excited to tell its story. So join us in a couple of weeks. We'll be back for that. And then we will start off 2025 with a bang.
Yeah.
We're doing porn.
Yep. All of the sex track movies.
Yeah, that's my Christmas gift. Is I get to cover all the Star Trek porns.
Not once during this whole series did I mention that in New Orleans, like right off Bourbon Street, you can go to the Boondock Saints bar, and I've been there with the wife, and actually, not a bad bar to just chill in, but they do play Boondock Saints 24/7.
Wow. With the sound on?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like low, so they play some music, so you gotta be paying attention to really get it. But it's an Irish pub, and it's and the bartenders are fun. So
cool. Well, maybe I'll go when I go to New Orleans. Well, I guess we're done. Until next time.
May the wings of liberty never lose a feather,
and be excellent to each other.
Shepherds we shall be, for thee, Johnny, for thee. Power hath descended from thy hand, that our feet may swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow a river forth to thee, and teeming with keys shall it ever be. In nomine Padre et Filii, Spiritus Johnny.
It's good. Your Irish accent's better than Norman Reedus.
Thank you. I was going for subtle there. So yeah.
Somebody should have given him that note.